Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for an only episode of recap of today's Days of Our Lives, April 9th, 2025. So we go back to the whole thing with Kristen, JJ, and Sean. And at this point, they're asking her about the gun, and she's saying that she does not have to answer them. She has somewhere else to go. So they said, you can come voluntarily or involuntarily, but we're going to get our answers today. And, we can just take this down to the station. So they actually did. And, she was definitely schooling them about how terrible they are as detectives and then they're not doing a really effective job. And, they're just asking her point blank if she had anything to do with EJ's shooting. This is before even any evidence has been brought to light. They didn't even check the gun for any prints or anything related to EJ shooting. And I'm saying they're just directly questioning her without a lawyer. And I'm saying Kristen is pointing out all the facts and all the inadequacies of their line of questioning and them as detectives. It's like they just literally read this detective dummy 101 kind of book, because honestly they're not doing this thing thoroughly. And even with Jada too, Jada sometimes she doesn't go by the book and she goes over people's place without any warrants and she's intimidating them, questioning people without lawyer. Like, it's not legally ethical, right? But anyways, Kristen reads them out and she says she's not answering any more questions without lawyer, because they were just there saying, she would have motive because of what he may or may not have done with, her mom being gone and all that, and her taking it into her own hands to off him and all that. So she said she want to have her lawyer, and they said, okay, sure about that. So she said, yeah, because you guys don't know what the heck you're doing. So, anyways, Gabby's still pondering over the article about EJ shooting, and there was flashbacks of her actually going over the Mirror Mansion and wanting to enter, but that was as far as where it went, right? So she's there pondering, and Melinda comes in, and Melinda's talking about how she had to deal with a lot of put out a lot of fires with the whole stocks plummeting because of EJ shooting. So she has a lot of damage control dealing with. So she they talk about EJ shooting, and Gabby saying that their boss in assumed that she might have something to do with it, and then she just threw back the question on her, saying that she may be a more of a prime suspect after what he might have done with her mom. So she just feels like, Kristen needs to look at her own self, right? She has more than, enough motive than her, right? So Melinda agrees that she has some points. At some point, Kristen calls her, and Kristen's like, Melinda, you need to come down here now, drop whatever you're doing and come down now. I need you, right? So Melinda tells Gabby that she has to go because, Kristen's down at the station and she's getting questioned for, her role or possible role in EJ shooting. So she gets down there, and at this time, Sean and JJ are outside the room, and they're wondering if the forensics came back on the bullet that was lodged in EJ. And turns out that the bullet is still at the hospital. Everybody pointing fingers, so nothing has been done. So they're saying, like, if this doesn't come back, we can't really hold her here, right? So Melinda comes in. Melinda says, you guys are really holding my client without any probable evidence. Like, did you guys even connect her with any residue on the gun linked to EJ shooting? And they're like, no, not as yet. So she's like, but you guys don't really have any cause. So may I see her? So they said, okay, she's in there. So she goes in and she's asking Kristen point blank, like, what really happened? Like, why did she have the gun? So she said she had the gun because, her mom had the gun. And that is true. She took the gun from her mom because she didn't want her mom walking around with a firearm, because, it's a family heirloom. So she was about to dispose of it, but she didn't get the time to do it. So Melinda said, you do know that they could have probably, because they could hold you just because of that gun, right? So it's like, let me ask you, like, did you have anything to do with EJ being shot? Did you do it? So never mind, you don't have to tell me that point, right? So she said, yeah, just know that, I have things under control. So at this point, we don't know if Kristen has anything to do with it, but I really honestly don't believe she has anything to do with it. Again, I think it's somebody that we are definitely not thinking about. Maybe it could be little Rachel that did it, or she's protecting Rachel. That could be a different way to spin this theory, right? So Philip is there at the hospital and he sees Kayla, and he said, "Oh, I'm just here, to check up on my prosthetic leg, see how it's doing." So she said, "That's good that you're checking up on yourself." So he said, at least, I'm not in a dire situation like EJ. Tell me, how is he? So this is where, Philip is being cunning and he's trying to be underhanded. And Kayla calls him out, and then Kayla's like, I'm not at liberty to tell you how he's doing. You're not even family. So he said, I get that, but, EJ is a public person. And, I don't know if you've read the article on him, and, a lot of things is of public interest. He is a major shareholder in the mirror. And so a lot of things is public about him being in a medically induced coma. So I think the public could know about whether or not he's going to make it or not. So she said, I get that, and I'm very close to my daughter, and, I heard about your underhanded business dealers. So, you know, I have nothing more to say, right? So Philip was honestly trying to get some information on EG to help him and Xander kind of take over the mirror. Because with him down and the stocks going down, this is their time to really strike. But again, Kayla is not at liberty to really tell them because of confidentiality, right? So Xander brings Mr. Shin over the top business about the art, based on the article with EJ being shot, things are looking really grim for the mayor, and it's now their time to really, strategize and see how best they can really merge the companies, I mean, at least, take over certain things, right? So Mr. Shin is saying, with that happening, the stocks going down, I can understand why we need to really think about what we need to do next. But there's still a big obstacle, Kristen, right? So Xander is thinking why she may be an obstacle. So he said she does have connections in the board. She has a lot of friends there, and even if I vote, of low confidence for her, it still might not be enough. So they're talking about it, and then Philip comes in, and Philip says, that may change. And they said, did you get any information from Kayla about Philip's condition, EJ's condition? So he said, not really. She wasn't gonna budge, but I did hear from the intruder that Christy was taken in by JJ and Sean for questioning relating to EJ shooting. So Shin is saying, with her being in custody, this is now the time to strike while the iron is hot and really vote her out so that he can go in as CEO and he can have creative control over, which projects he want to do and them coming in. So this is where they start making calls, and at some point we see Philip and Xander go over to Gabby Chic and, talk to Gabby, and Gabby's like, what are you guys doing here? So Philip and Xander said, this is our new office. So I guess we'll know more about that conversation tomorrow, right? So Bella and her conflicted conscience go over to EJ's bedside, and she's just worried about him. And she has this dream. At first, I thought EJ was waking up, but it was a dream. I guess him talking to her and saying that he's in a medically induced coma, like he still is wondering, like, what is she doing there, after she wore a wire to really get him in trouble for what happened with Rafe and Jada, and trying to set him up and let him go to jail for it, right? So he's like, what are you doing there? So she says, regardless, I still care about you, and I don't want to see nothing happen to you. I don't want to see that. Like, I would have wished that on my worst enemy, not even you. So it's like, really, I find that hard to believe, because honestly, when you told me what you did, and I saw when I told you that I'm in your head, I'm in your soul, I'm in your heart, I saw what it did to you. Like, it's just you denying it for yourself. You need to really be honest with yourself and with me. Like, do you love me or not? So at some point she said, like, yes, I do, I love you, EJ. So at some point Kayla walks in and she's like, Belle. So Belle wakes up out of the dream, right? So she asks Belle what she's doing here, like how she make it past the guards. So she said, I use my DA credentials and they let me in. So she's like, what are you doing here? Like, she said, she wanted to check in on EJ, how's he doing? So I'm surprised Kayla even tell her a little bit about what's going on with him, and that he's okay. We're just not sure when he's gonna come out of the coma. So she just says she's praying for him that he comes out of it and that they can find who did it. And Kayla is also wishing him same, which is definitely noble of her, regardless of their history, right? So She asks about her and how she doing with her dad being missing. So she says she's hopeful because she feels as if you know they're on to finding him, and Kayla says Steve is gonna definitely bring him home safe and sound, and she believes that. So JJ, this is when JJ texts her and says that he needs to meet up with her. So she leaves, and Belle asks her for a minute to stay there with him, and she said okay, don't be too long, right? So, anyways, Kayla goes over to JJ and Sean there at the hospital, and she has the bullet. So it seems as if nobody picked it up. So they take it for it to be analyzed, right? So Belle sits back at EJ's bedside, and she's like, EJ, you gotta come back. I love you. So at this point, a surprise face came in, and it was Sammy overhearing her. So she's like, "Oh, isn't that sweet? Hello, Belle." So that was where it ended for today's episode. But I'm here for the whole Sammy and Belle showdown and how that's gonna go, because I definitely know that Belle was not expecting her. So let's see how this introduction, how this addition, I should say, you know, come into play. So that is it, guys. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to my channel. Comment below your thoughts on today's episode. I will see you guys tomorrow.